Hey there guys, Godly Seafood here, back with another Wizard101 world profile video. Today we're taking a look at Marleybone. Marleybone is a world very much inspired by Victorian England, steampunk science fiction, and Western European history, with a dash of early 1900s crime gangsters. After the destruction of the First World by the Three Titans, the First World was shattered into pieces. Grandmother Raven would take these fragments and weave them together with the help of Bartleby, who sang the Song of Creation, and would use the heart of Grandfather Spider in order to bind the spiral together. Ancient Marleybones seem to have recorded their knowledge of the destruction of the First World. It's obvious to Marleybonians that the world was once part of a larger world consisting of all the other world fragments in the spiral, and that a galactic catastrophe had caused the land to split apart. However, modern-day Marleybonians seem to disregard and even mock their primitive ancestors who believed that the world was part of a great tree and broken apart after a great war. Modern Marleybonian scholars believe that the First World was struck by a large bone flying through space. We see this type of thing happen firsthand during the story in Polaris. We, the player character, have to have a Marleybonian explorer look into old Zafarian lore paintings to discover the identity of one of the children of Grandfather Spider. And even though there's genuine cave paintings describing in great detail how a primordial being was trapped and created children to help him destroy the spiral, like, we have literal proof and we have met the fucking guy, the Marleybonian scholar just laughs it off as being total bullshit for no reason. The Marleybonian scholars are so stuck up and closed-minded that they won't even entertain the perspectives of others. In its early days, the world of Marleybone would be home to tribes of dogs who warred against one another. There are probably cats and mice, just like how there are in modern-day Marleybone, but the lore books only bother to point out dogs so far, so yeah. It's said that the tribes finally stopped warring after some dude named Bahamut clapped hella cheeks and made everybody his bitches. Look it up, it's in there. It says it in the lore, I guarantee it, 100%. But no. For real, Bahamut won over all of the warring clans by defeating them in a mighty battle, and after this, seemingly united all of the dog tribes. After the wars and the great loss of life, it was decided that all dogs should swear to strive only for peace, and from there on, the world of Marleybone would explore the arts and sciences in order to create an ideal world for themselves. At some point, Marleybone created a kingdom which would come to be ruled by a line of really shitty Marleybone kings. Sometime after that, like the lore book just completely skip over that. Sometime after that, as the memory of those despised kings faded, interest in ancient Marleybone grew. This would usher in a renaissance of sorts, where the population would become infatuated with poetry and science. Inventors would build upon ancient knowledge to create the first machines, like the printing press and cars, air balloons, metal men. Like, they go ham on the science in Marleybone. Sometime during the Renaissance in Marleybone, a popular printer would be imprisoned because he spoke out against the government. It seemed likely that a revolt could happen at any time. However, the reigning Queen Ellen decided to release him and would actually go on to form a parliament. Her reign would be remembered as a golden age in Marleybonian history. After the Golden Age, a forgotten area of research would change Marleybone forever. An individual named Harold Digmore studied ancient myths for Parliament. One evening, this man literally got isekai'd into a new world after reading a line of ancient text. He found himself in the middle of Wizard City, probably in the middle of the Commons, where he just had to stand and watch and listen to a bunch of 13-year-old boys shouting, "Looking for GF," or "I'll buy packs if you become my GF." Some would imagine the sights and sounds of wizards yelling toxic insults about stats or stitches would have caused Harold Digmore to take his own life shortly after, but then again, no one can really say for sure. One can only imagine this type of cringe and beef that would have surrounded the Commons in the old times. Anyway, this would show the Marleybonian people that there wasn't just a single world in the universe, there were multiple worlds held together in a spiral formation, and that would be the inspiration for a lot of scientific inventions, as well as the exploration of other worlds. After Harold Digmore returned to Marleybone and reported the existence of other worlds and proved that travel was possible to the other worlds, the power of magic would flow into Marleybone like a wildfire. Advances in both science and magic would allow the Marleybonian people to spend less time on jobs like farming and more time enjoying leisure. However, these advancements would also allow some in Marleybone to grow more powerful than others. And also, if anybody's interested in what happened to Harold Digmore, He ended up having the balloon cart station named after him, hence Digmore Station. It's not directly stated what caused tensions between the cats and dogs of Marleybone to peak. However, we do know that the cat general Robert E. Leary would wage war on all the dogs in Marleybone. The dogs would fight back, of course, and the dog general Sherman and Bones would defeat the revolting cats and preserve political stability in Marleybone. I would imagine that the cause of the cats' uprising was probably just the genuine availability of both scientific inventions as well as the newly widespread use of magic. We actually see that in modern day Marleybone, gangs of cats and mice use magic as well as mechanical automatons to wreak havoc throughout all of Marleybone. In the 5 Boxes event that features Halston Baelstrom, which canonically is before the events of the original vanilla Wizard101 storyline, Baelstrom is set up by a gang under the control of Meowyarty, and it would seem that Meowyarty was a pretty powerful and influential crime gang leader for quite some time. However, sometime later he would be imprisoned in Newgate Prison, leading up to the main vanilla story of Wizard101. So, in the original vanilla story of Wizard101, our character is trailing Malistaire in order to get the Croconomicon before he can. For reference, the Croconomicon is the tome of ultimate life and death magic created by the Order of the Fang in order to put the Tuts into an eternal sleep and free all of the Manders in Crocotopia. Well, centuries later, the Marleybonian Expeditionary Force makes their way to the ancient world of Crocotopia and discovers a very interesting culture with a shit ton of gold and treasure that weren't currently being used by any of the inhabitants. So, like any good British explorer wannabes, they decide to say, fuck it, and take everything. They take the treasures, the artifacts, and all sorts of stuff and ship it off to the Royal Museum in Marleybone so that the Marleybonian people can stand in awe of another culture's history and religious artifacts and such. And for some fucking reason, the Manders don't really seem to have an issue with them doing this. Things are going great until the Royal Marleybonian Expeditionary Force accidentally undoes the magic seals on the Crocotopian tombs, which causes the spell that kept the Tuts asleep to just be undone. And then a war breaks out between the long-forgotten Order of the Fang and the Tuts. Honestly, I find it pretty interesting how the Royal Marleybonian Expeditionary Force managed to make it all the way to the secret, heavily guarded location of the Tomb of Storms and straight up nicked the Sarcophagus of Souls from Crocopatra. This is a big deal because Crocopatra hid the Croconomicon inside of the Sarcophagus of the Souls for safekeeping, and well, Malistaire arrives, learns the location of the Croconomicon, and just decides to dip. Our character gallops all around Crocotopia, toppling the Tut forces, only to find out that Malistaire dipped almost immediately as soon as he had gotten into Crocotopia, and it was essentially a waste of time for us to do anything in Crocotopia, because now we're even farther behind in trailing Malistaire than we were at the point when we got to Crocotopia in the first place. After realizing that Crocopatra hid the Croconomicon inside of the Sarcophagus of the Souls, and that the Royal Marleybonian Expedition took the Sarcophagus of Souls and brought it to the Royal Marleybonian Museum, we take a trip over to the Royal Marleybonian Museum, talk to the guy in charge of the museum, and without any issue whatsoever, we're able to just talk it out, get the Croconomicon, return to Ambrose, and Malistaire's entire plan to bring his wife back to life at the expense of the safety of the Spiral is just completely put down entirely. Oh, what's that? The people who basically stole the Sarcophagus of Skulls from Crocotopia decided to not let us take the Croconomicon since they really didn't give a shit about it to begin with, causing us to have to help their dumbasses to put down a gang uprising and a prison raid? Oh yeah, that's right. We did have to do all of that because it would be too easy to just talk things through diplomatically and come to a genuine conclusion that an absolute fucking mad lad is prancing around the Spiral with his eyes set on the most powerful life and death tome in existence that is currently sitting in the museum on accident, and the Marleybonians don't want to give it up even though they really can't afford any more political instability at the moment because of all the crime gangs wreaking havoc in their city. I shit you not, Clancy Pembroke, the person in charge of the Royal Museum in Marleybone, specifically tells us that Malistaire can't get to the Croconomicon because the museum has anti-magical defenses protecting it from magical-based heist. Never mind the fact that our wizard just walked straight into the museum in the dead of the early morning without any opposition. This is bullshit. So after being told that we can't just solve the storyline right then and there under the most basic of means, we basically end up having to go and help all of Marleybone with all of its crime. We start off by talking to Sherlock Bones. He tells us that there's an informant that needs to be protected, but they can't get to him. So we go and we find out that this informant is named Baxter. He's just some random ass hoodlum. And after being harassed by some metal men trying to get to him and some O'Leary gang, we find out that Baxter was up to no good, probably doing stupid, dumb shit, and overheard that there was going to be something going down in the ironworks and that the O'Learys were behind it. Well, a couple of gang members saw him, and he freaked out and left, and he's been on somebody's hit list ever since because, obviously something's going down. Well, after that, we go to investigate the ironworks, only to find our way all the way up to Pops O'Leary and discover that the O'Leary gang is planning a prison raid in order to break Meowiarty out of prison. In case you didn't know, Meowiarty is this, genius, high-level, 10,000 IQ burglar who, I guess the O'Learys are like part of his little crime syndicate, or they work together, something like that. Well, by the time we make our way to Pops O'Leary and finish fighting him, it turns out that we're too late. The raid's already started and it's happening right now. So we have to run our asses all the way down to Newgate Prison, only to be cock-blocked by Malistaire, who showed up to add reinforcements to the O'Leary gang's forces to break Meowiarty out of prison. And subsequently, this causes us to not be able to follow Meowiarty, and he gets away. Well, after that, the leads have run dry. We don't have any leads, and so we go do some bullshit side quest level main story quest that has to do with Jacques the Scratcher, Jack the Ripper ripoff, and we have to go deal with that. He's defiling all of the Danes in Marleybone. We clap his cheeks, come back, and Watson just decides to pull it out of his ass that, hey, those metal men that were fucking with us, we somehow found their leader. His name's Katzenstein. Go deal with them. So we go and deal with Katzenstein, only to find out that Meowiarty, the O'Leary gang, or what's left of it, and an army of metal men are planning on just running straight into the museum and robbing it. All of the counterweight dungeons are taken over by metal men, while Meowiarty and Malistaire make their way to the Sarcophagus of Souls. But anyway, we find our way up the counterweight dungeons to unlock the elevator so that we can go up the elevator, reach Meowiarty and Malistaire, but Malistaire got what he came for. He got the Croconomicon, he dips, and so we are stuck fighting Meowiarty while he gets away. We fight Meowiarty, Katzenstein, and all of their cronies, or most of them end up getting locked up, and that's about it. After that, we're just like, fuck this world. We need to go to the Emperor of Mushu to get the Dragonspire Spiral Key, and we did. And that is basically the main story of Marleybone in a nutshell. Interestingly enough, King's Isle sometime later decided to release the Barkingham Palace dungeons at level 40, which is honestly just another heist mixed with inspiration from Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. The Barkingham Palace dungeons also featured the now late Queen Elizabeth, maybe not specifically her, but her likeness and image, but as a corgi, because Marleybone's a dog world and corgis were her favorite dogs, I guess. It's kind of cool, but honestly, there's not a lot for me to talk about with the Barkingham Palace dungeons. To me, they kind of just redid the entire main Wizard 101 vanilla story, in my opinion. Like, there's trouble, there's a heist, there's a Victorian England inspired story goon, and then we win. It's a cool dungeon, but there's honestly not that much to talk about. The last thing that I can think to talk about in regards to Marleybone are the events of the Doctor Who side quests and dungeons and gauntlets, and the events of Novus. For anybody who doesn't know, the Doctor Who side quests in Wizard 101 basically feature the Doctor as a dog who is definitely of Marleybonian descent, who put all of his skill points into steampunk gadgets and gizmos rather than old Victorian England type stuff. And during Novus, Marleybone is just a world power seeking to claim land in the newly formed world of Novus, and has a mix of old style English armies, like really old musket holding, like pre-World War I type armies, with a dash of science fiction and steampunk stuff going on. And that just about does it for Marleybone. I don't really think that I've got too much to talk about. I haven't played through Novus a ton, so I don't really have that good of a grasp on what the story really tells aside from just the general plot points. Marleybone as a world as a whole is not terrible. I don't really think it's exceptionally great like some of the other worlds, but I don't think it's dog shit. Like, I can get behind some of the Victorian England style stuff, like the gangsters and the the prison raid stuff like that, but I'm just not a fan of the fact that 60% through the storyline of Marleybone, you get this Jack the Ripper side quest level story quest. Like, we have to do this in order to progress the story, and it adds nothing. It's simply just a cash grab on the name of Jack the Ripper, honestly. It's there for hype, nothing else. Seriously, after the dungeon, Watson pulls Katzenstein's name out of his ass. I don't even know why they decided to do that rather than expand, searching for the Metal Man. Like, that could have taken over Jacques the Scratcher, and the story would have been way better, in my opinion. But yeah, other than that, hopefully you guys enjoyed that. It's been a little while. I've been meaning to make this video for a minute. I just haven't. I've been questing through Polaris and Mirage and just trying to get done with Arc 3. I'm almost there, starting Imperia Part 1 here in a little bit. So yeah, hopefully it won't be too long until my next video, or main video like this one.
No, I keep pissing.